Hello, and welcome to episode 382 of Scarves Around the Funnel, the podcast dedicated to, fuck it, Premiership leaders Heart of Midlothian. Still, albeit might not be for much longer. I'm Mark Donaldson, joined for an Edinburgh derby post-mortem by, first of all, Mr. Scott McIntosh. How are you feeling?
Yeah, we were sort of discussing this just before starting live. It's a bit of a strange one. I think most Hearts fans at the 60-minute mark, your mind was starting to wander to not the ramifications of the derby itself in isolation, but taking a bit of a hammering and how that would maybe affect us going into the next run of games that I think we all viewed prior to today as being a winnable sort of three matches that are upcoming. So I think the last half an hour, we can debate how it comes about between Hearts having a go and Hibs maybe tiring and sort of sitting back a bit more. But I think the last half an hour's probably had a good positive effect on how we're feeling moving forward past today.
No need to ask how our next guest is feeling. He's a bastard. He's a Hibs bastard. He's a gloating Hibs bastard. Sky's co-commentator today, along with Neil McCann. It's Mr. Stuart Lovell. Hello, you.
Good evening. Good evening to you both. I must say, I was pleasantly surprised to get the invite to come on. I hope that you won't have Hearts fans turning off en masse at the sound of my voice. I'm sure there'll be plenty of rude adjectives to describe me, but I won't be gloating. It's not my style. There's another two derbies to go. Well, if assuming Hibs make the top six, which is an assumption for sure. I think we can say Hearts will be in the top six. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think Hibs will be, but so there'll probably two more derbies to go. But you get bragging rights, for a while. But I always say these games, these results are for the fans. And I noticed that they only roll out Sunshine on Leith for the big game. So take that as a compliment that that song only comes out when it's a result that really matters. But yeah, I think that over the piece, I thought the best team won. But it was kind of typical Hibs hanging on to a grim death at the end.
I've known you for many, many years, and one thing about you, Stuart, is you're honest, very honest. A spade's a spade, whether it's about teams you like, teams you don't like. And I thought it was important tonight as well because I want to kind of get a different viewpoint of Hearts. Because Scott and I will speak about what we thought about today's performance, what we thought about the season so far. But I want to get it from someone who watches a lot of Scottish football, the standard of the game right now, what chance Hearts have of potentially winning the title or even being title challengers. And while we don't want to repeat the same thing that we say every week, sometimes it's nice just to get it from a different viewpoint. We might agree, we might disagree, but that is why we are all here. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest, Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. The second Edinburgh derby of the season. Scott McIntosh, we expected Halkett to come in for Kent. We also expected Milne to come in for Kingsley. We got one of the two. We got Halkett in for Kent. What did you think of Stephen Kingsley getting Derek McInnes's approval to remain in the team with Harry Milne on the bench?
I understand the decision based on how Stephen Kingsley's played whenever he's been called upon this season. I do think considering Meg was starting down the right for Hibs today, I feel like it maybe wasn't the right call to have Milne on the bench and also Kizarides starting in, playing on the right side of the pitch as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of this where I've got my Captain Hindsight hat on here talking about, because I think, that most of the noise pre-match, I think most fans were generally quite happy with the setup of the team. I think Halkett coming back in was probably the main priority. Some fans would have maybe liked to have seen Benny back in, but again, we're not quite sure if he's maybe ready to start games yet. So yeah, I think the main sort of bony contention's probably that decision to maybe not start Harry Milne. I do think Kizarides, coming in for the left-hand side with Milne playing that proper sort of full-back role and getting up and down the park does give us something, especially in light of the fact that we're still quite light over on the right-hand side of the park, whilst we're still trying to get a couple of deals over the line to sort of help there. So yeah, that was probably the main one. But I think when we go on to talk about the performance today, I I think we need to probably highlight the decision making and the performances of the players rather than the tactical nous of
Hmm.
the manager. Because I do think a lot of the criticism that's going Derek McInnes's way off the back of today, a lot of it is with that hindsight hat on.
Yeah, and I want to read some Derek McInnes quotes as we go on, but he was talking about not doing the basics right. And when you don't do the basics right, you're in trouble, whether it's not stopping a diagonal ball cross field, whether it's not stopping a cross in, whether it's not getting your marker. That's all things that we can talk about going forward. But Stuart, I'm not betraying any trust by reading out part of a message you sent me earlier. And you said, I said to Neil McCann beforehand, surely he'll play Kizaridis on the left against Megwa. Was that a missed opportunity for Hearts today not to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Neil knows Derek pretty well, and I think they'd swapped a couple of messages. He did say that that Derek's quite uh, cautious in terms of what information he's going to share, which is perfectly within his gift to do so. Although I think he would probably feel that he could trust Neil. It goes on a lot more than you'd imagine. I think you'll know this with your experience in broadcasting, but certainly when I used to work with Setanta back in the day, Ian Crocker used to get the teams from Walt Smith, Gordon Strachan, you name it. And I was staggered. I was like, wow, they share that information with you? And that was almost like the rubber stamp of who Ian Crocker liked or didn't like as a manager. If he didn't share, they didn't share their information. He was a bad guy. I won't mention who was on the naughty step and remains on the naughty step. But no, Neil and I had a chat beforehand, and I said I just kind of took it as read. I was like, well, you'll play Kizaridis on the left because I think that's where he's been at his most devastating this season. And Megwa, who I actually thought had a very good game, to be fair to him, very good game, and I must say I thought it was quite a big call. But I think some of the things that happened in the game, and Scott, you've touched on it, we're all talking about the game in hindsight, so we're all very clever, we're all experts after the game. But I think David Gray made that call because he felt he could trust Megwa more defensively than he could Chris Cadden. And I don't know whether you remember it, I'm sure you will, the unbelievable chance that fell to Shankland late on when he hit it beautifully, and the keeper made an incredible save. That came about where Cadden tried to dive in front of Kizaridis, went for a header early, misjudged it. Kizaridis got in behind him, got to the byline, cut it back. Shankland hits the shot. You're waiting for the net to ripple, and the goalie saved it. But I don't think that would have happened had Megwa still been on the pitch, because I think he was actually he's a natural defender, doesn't give Hibs anywhere near as much going forward. But David Gray was like, that's not the day for this. The most devastating player in Hearts' team in terms of cutting edge is Kizaridis. You have to stop him. I said this to you a while ago. I'd start to see teams, I wouldn't say figure Kizaridis out, but they were prepared to double up on him and let Hearts have it on the other side. And this is where I think, with respect to fans, even though they talk like they know the game, they think, Hearts fans are like, oh, we're just going to keep going. This winning run's going to carry on. Like, no one watches them. Now, I have to be honest, when I saw Hearts put Celtic to the sword, I couldn't believe my eyes when Kizaridis got the ball, cut inside again, beat Schmeichel at his near post. And I'm like, has no one watched this guy? This is what he does. He shapes to go down the line. I mean, he's got great feet. He's got brilliant body swerve. He puts people off balance, but he's got an absolute, hammer of a right peg. So you have to take it away from him. And you double up on him and say, and this is where I said to you about I'm going to call it the Harry Milne experiment on the right. I don't get it. I don't agree with it. I don't understand it. Because what you effectively have is that you have a devastating winger on one side, a lefty cutting in on the right, and then you have a righty cutting in from the left in Kizaridis, and then you have Milne, who, let's be honest, is a fullback to trade. You put him on the right-hand side, he can cut inside and deliver balls in, but he can't run down the line. Wingers have to have that threat to be able to show a fullback a clean pair of heels and go down to the byline and cross. Milne can't do that because he doesn't have the legs. He's not quick enough, doesn't have that change of pace. And that cross in from the right-hand side is what wingers develop over time. And this is where I said to you, Kajota, he did that against Hibs in the first derby. little drop of the shoulder. Martin Boyle fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, and Kajota floated a beautiful ball in. Like, little bit of whip, little bit of pace, very hard ball to defend. Goalie couldn't come for it. Hibs went to sleep. Halkett, far post, 1-0, good night, Vienna. And for me, that's what you'll get when you get an out and out winger. I think you've mentioned to me that Hearts are, I think Scott, you're talking about the the players that the Hearts are trying to get over the line. I think today will be a reflection on, right, okay, so Kajota's, he actually has got something, because I thought he came on and added something when he came on. But it's like, well, it's him and or Chesnikov. This is these, you want that, the best teams have got 2 players in every position. So if they get Chesnikov over the line, who I believe is a lefty that plays on the right, brilliant for Hearts. If not, I would say, well, Kajota's your guy. Put your trust in him, and he's either good enough or he isn't. But I haven't seen much of him. But I have to be honest, I like what I've seen. I think he's got something. He has got that change of gear. You remember when he overran the ball once and he ran it out of play, but the intention was correct, because they showed him down the line and said, "Go on your weak foot." And he went, "Thanks very much. See you later." And he was gone. He just overran it ever so slightly. But this is what wingers have got to do, and this is what I think Kizaridis has done so well. If they show him down the line, he'll take it. His left foot cross isn't fantastic, but once you get to the byline, it's trouble for defenders. And I think this is one of the things that I think Derek will reflect on today. He'll think about what he did with the team. He'll think about team selection. And if and I think to be honest, I think he's been the star of the show for Hearts this season, way over above the players. I think the manager's been phenomenal. What he's done, I think, is absolutely incredible. But did he get it right today? I certainly think there were a few things that you would pick up on to say, you mentioned it, Scott, in hindsight. If I had my time again, would I play Kizaridis on the left? I think you should. I wouldn't bring on Milne, I'd bring on Kajota. Personally, as I've said to you, Mark, I'm a big fan of Beningame, who definitely was the catalyst. I know it kind of took Hearts a while to get on top in the second half, but when they did, he was the guy. He was the guy. He was the driving force. He took the game by the scruff of the neck, got the ball, drove between lines, and every pass he made was forward. And that's that was when Hearts really started. And you're watching Hibs thinking they can't get out. They're clearing the lines, giving it back, and it was like waves of attack. And Neil said to me, if that game went on another 10 minutes, Hearts would probably win. And it's like, well, that's incredible when you consider they played for the last 15 minutes plus added time. They didn't come to the game till 75 minutes, really.
Have their first shot on target, Hearts, until the 68th minute, when Kizaridis cut inside and stung the palms of a goalkeeper I'm not convinced is decent. He's made a brilliant save, but both you and Neil were having a right go at him in commentary. There was a couple. I think one was an offside decision, but he decided to chest it rather than catch it. But anyway, look, it took us until the 68th minute to do so. We're jumping ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the start, Scott. And there's 2 chances that sum up the initial half hour of this game. Hibs scoring with a half chance, a decent half chance, and Hearts missing a glaring opportunity with Shanklin's header. Let's talk about the Hibs goal to begin with. First Scott and then Stuart. I thought Michael Steinwender had a very difficult first half. I thought he's been great of late, but he didn't start well. And he was caught out. Hearts were caught out by a diagonal. We weren't close enough. The ball's played in. The goal is scored. Is this a cumulative blame, Scott, on Hearts, certain players? Or what is this opening goal and the concession of it from a Hearts perspective?
Well, I think if you decide that you're going to go 4-3-3 against a 3-5-2, I think you've got to make sure that one of your central midfielders is going to be pressing on whoever's going to look to make that switchy play for Hibs. And I think looking at the makeup of the Hibs team, it was always going to be Barlaser that was going to be that focal point for them in terms of when they were on the ball. Nobody's anywhere near him. So it's a decent switchy play for him, but I'd question why nobody's anywhere near him to try and press on him and make that more difficult. You've then got the issue going 1-on-1 with their left wing back, because we're playing with 3 men basically in the final third and we're trying to hit them on the break. So you've got Kizaridis nowhere to be seen, and then it becomes a Casey Steinwender against Cadden. Now, I think this is an issue with the modern day fullback. This isn't just something that I've noticed today. For some reason, they're so inept at stopping cross balls. It's just something now that doesn't seem to be a big factor or metric that people look for. Now, Steinwender is a centre half by trade as well. Nicky Cadden does well to just get that half a yard to put the ball in. But again, Steinwender should be doing a lot better there. So from his point of view, it's a decent ball in, and I'd say it's an intelligent finish from McGrath in terms of not maybe getting full purchase on the ball, but just managing to hit it into the ground. So it's a good finish from their point of view. But from a Hearts point of view, it's so avoidable. But it starts with the switchy play. Surely we knew that Hibs would have been targeting us down that right-hand side, given the problems we've been having there all season, and given the fact that Cadden's the best crosser of the ball on the Hibs side. But again, not being able to press Barlasa at the starting point of that move is where it starts to go wrong for us.
It's the perfect start, Stuart, for Hibernian. What did you make of them after that? Did they try and go for more? Did they retreat? Because they did towards the end of the half and kind of got into their shell and thought, fine, okay, we're 1-0 up before they got their second goal. But straight after they scored, what did you make of Hearts' response to the Hibs opening goal? And what did you make of what Hibs did after they went ahead?
Hearts looked a little bit spooked to me, which is no surprise. I think any team, when you concede after 2 minutes, 15 seconds or whatever it was, that's a punch to the solar plexus. That's not part of the game plan. I can tell you, having been in an awful lot of team talks, I've never heard a manager say start slowly. I've heard an awful lot of managers say start quick. But the point is, it's not easy for both teams to start quick. Someone takes the initiative. And I think that what was interesting to me was, the one time when you can see what the opposition shape is going to be is when the goalkeeper has taken a kick. So you kind of look at it and say, right, because a lot of teams like to play out. I'm looking at when Salinger had the ball and Hearts went right up. So they had Kizaridis on the right and Shankland right up and Braga right up, and then Magnuson was up. And Devlin wasn't too far, So they were basically saying you're going to kick it long, because we've got two centre halves who win aerial duels all day long. So you're going to knock it into our strength. We'll win the header and we'll play with the bits from here. I mean, it's interesting that Scott flags up how Balassa gets that much space on the ball. I have to be honest, that pass surprised me because I've seen a bit of him. I didn't realise he had that in the locker. He's quite a tidy player, Balassa. I thought he had a decent game today. And he was very composed. But that was a lovely zing. I mean, that was like a 50-yard pass. He had quite a big area to hit, but he hit it perfect. One bounce, chest. This is my point. Scott's picked up on we should stop the pass. Sometimes people get a switch of play. That shouldn't be like, oh, they're going to score. There's still an awful lot that needs to happen between the ball getting played to Cadden and Hibbs sticking it in the net. And I think that this is where I suppose this was drilled in, particularly when I played 3 years under Alec McLeish. McLeish was like, stop the cross, stop the cross, stop the cross, stop it at source, and then people don't have to defend. Where I thought that Steinwender did not do well is with respect to Cadden. Cadden's not quick. He's not Kizaridis. He's not going to run at you and get you off balance and have that change of pace. Cadden, you'll remember the goal that he set up at Tynecastle last year. Touch out of his feet, whipped an unbelievable cross. And I forget who was playing against him, but they thought they had him. When he went to cross it, they're like, there's no way you're putting a ball in. Cadden curls the ball like Beckham. He really gets a lot of bend on it. So you actually have to go another, I would say, half a yard to your right to say, you're not crossing it in behind me. But you know what he did? He actually skipped around him. He beat him. He actually got around him because you remember the cross was from closer to the byline. Where they went wrong, and this is for me where fans don't see what we see. Neil and I were speaking about this at half time. Defenders automatically get attracted back to the 6-yard box. Of course they would. Get around the goalie, protect the goal, near post area, 6-yard line. That's what they do. That's not where Devlin should be. That's not where Magnuson should be. They don't need to be on the 6-yard line. If you look where they are when the cross comes in, and have a look again, and you'll see they get an angle from behind Cadden when he crosses the ball. They're on the 6-yard box. Wrong place. Because now a lot of teams are aware that defenders get attracted back to their goal. What's the best cross? The cutback. So as soon as he got to that byline, I was thinking, right, you've got three choices. You whip it in near post with unbelievable pace, you hang it up fast stick, for the guy around the back, or you cut it back. And I don't know I can't remember whether Cadden had a look up, but he basically kind of picked the choice of cutback. And when you see that all of their weight is going back towards goal, Magnuson and Devlin, they've lost their man. McGrath's just peeled off. I think he's inside the penalty spot, 10 yards out, something like that. And the ball comes to him, and he just concentrates on hitting it down into the ground, and he beats him at his near post. No fault on the goalkeeper whatsoever. But to me, I mean, Hearts fans have been talking about this a lot, haven't you? You've been talking about we don't have a right back. So you've got the guy Borsch Grevic, but you know the guy I mean.
Yeah.
So you've got him. You've had McIntosh. Don't play him there again, by the way. Never a right back in a million years. Borsch Grevink, or you've got this guy. Now, you can turn centre backs into full backs if they got quick feet. But Steinvender's a big unit and he doesn't turn too fast. So if he's playing against tricky wingers, of which there aren't many, in fairness, if he gets exposed one-on-one, I would worry about him defending 1v1 if someone's getting at him. So that, I would imagine that when Derek's assessing his squad and he's speaking to Tony Bloom and the board and stuff like, what do you because they're bound to say, what do you need? What do you know? We're top of the table. We're in the title race. What do you need? I mean, he's got to look at what he's got and say, right, Borsch Grevink, he either likes him or he doesn't. If he liked him, he'd be playing today, surely. McIntosh, no chance. Steinwender, is he the answer for the rest of the season to win the league? Probably not.
No, they're going to sign it. They're going to sign a lad called Jordi Altena,
Okay.
who's coming in from the Netherlands. He's a converted midfielder who's been playing at right back, and he gets forward. But Hearts aren't going to change a winning side. They're not going to not play Steinwender because they've won at Celtic Park, they've won at Falkirk, and they've beaten Rangers. He didn't have a great game, and it happens, Scott. But I thought the reaction was all right. I thought Kingsley's delivery in was to the right person. It was just one of those things. Maybe he's trying to be too precise, Lawrence Shankland, and heads it wide. But that was the chance. They've scored with a half chance. We've missed a glaring chance.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on the point there you made about not changing a winning side, I do think there's opportunities where that should be the case. I think we've discussed it at length over the last 2 to 3 weeks about we kind of fell into this three-man midfield just prior to the Celtic game. And I felt like playing Celtic, Falkirk and Rangers was a good opportunity to play that midfield three because their strength was about winning second balls rather than what they would do when they were in possession. But I always felt like there was going to be a run of games coming after that where we would play against teams who were happy for us to have the ball. And for those occasions, we maybe need to have someone in there that's maybe capable of being a bit more progressive with their passing for the midfield. And I think you probably saw that a little bit with Berry in the second half. Like I touched on earlier, though, whether he was fully fit and could have started the game, we just don't know. But I do think we got to see a team doing to us what we've done to other teams this season. And that's what was Hibs played a really good derby game today. You know, it was about winning the second balls. It was about being just up in our face and just being first to those second balls. And I think Mulligan was a real driving force behind that. That was one of the key sort of winning battles for them in that opening sort of 50 to 60 minutes. Going back to the Shankland chance, he near enough does everything right. It's not a bad effort. It's not really what you'd call a sitter. It's a good chance for Lawrence Shankland because we know how good he can be in those situations. But yeah, I mean, it was one of the only few things that kind of happened in note for a good sort of half an hour after that initial goal. Hibs would have been happy with that. Like I say, Hearts had quite a lot of the ball in the first half, but again, without really penetrating Hibs. Hibs seemed quite comfortable knowing when to trigger that press against Hearts and then try and sort of just play those percentage balls in between the full-backs and the centre halves. I think that was something Hibs done really well all game today. They maybe didn't quite take advantage of all of that, particularly in the second half when they had a few occasions when they were maybe one-on-one or two against one, just by knocking those little balls into those areas. And pulling, I would say, Finlay more than anyone out into an uncomfortable area of the park where he didn't want to be. But yeah, going back to the Shatland chance, it's a decent chance for him, but it's not a bad effort. But that says a lot about us in the first half. Although you could potentially say there wasn't a lot in it between the two teams because Hibs themselves didn't create much. I felt that Hibs were quite comfortable in that position of being one up and kind of just throwing the gauntlet down to Hearts and saying, well, what are you going to do? Because Hibs were winning the majority of their individual battles up to that point.
I thought you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about Hibs did to Hearts what Hearts have done to most sides this season. And there was an intensity. They played with kind of two running eights, putting pressure on when they didn't have the ball and then helping trying to support Boyle and Bowie in attack. And Hearts couldn't get to grips with that. And Stuart, here's a quote from Derek McIntosh after the game, who said, "We've had loads of plaudits this season about how we play, the goals we score, the individual elements of our team, but we simply don't do the basics well enough today. It's as simple as that. You can look at team selection, you can look at all the rest of it, but we don't stop a switch of play, we don't stop a cross, and we don't match a run for the opening goal." What did Hearts not do well enough in that first half? Bearing in mind, I said earlier, we didn't have a shot on target until the 68th minute.
Well, I'm going to give you an alternative view because you guys will be talking about Hearts, and let's be honest, fans, even though I think you guys will be two of the most fair-minded Hearts fans out there, and you're not like, you're not just waving the flag for the sake of it and telling everyone that Hearts are the best thing since sliced bread. But I don't think fans look at your own team differently to how other teams see them. And I said to Neil that I saw Hearts against Kilmarnock a little while back when they drew 1-1 with the late equaliser at Tynecastle. And it was funny because Derek was furious afterwards. I interviewed him after the game. He was absolutely furious. And his line that stuck with me was 1-0. Sometimes 1-0 is enough. It's enough. You can win 1-0 and that's all right. And he was frustrated because he was like, Killy didn't have much. But Killy would just come in there to stay in the game and thinking, we hope we're still in the game with 15 minutes to go, which they were, and that something might happen, which it did. And all right, the goalie spilled one in it. But what was really interesting to me, seeing them that night at Kilmarnock with little or no confidence, they doubled up on Kizaridis. Milne was still playing that kind of wide right role. Hearts had nothing going down the side, and they defended balls into the box and set pieces really well. And I think I said to you that the goal that Hart scored, it was a lovely finish by Shankland. The pass wasn't even intended for him. Magnuson tried to play it into Gabore, overhit the pass. Gabore gave up on it. The two Killy centre backs went fast asleep. Shankland, who's nearly as slow as me, ran in the channel, just thinking it might. That's what good strikers do. It might come. Oh, it has come through. Thanks very much. And then at that point, I was watching it thinking, well, good teams will either get a second goal or they'll kind of, they'll see this game out. And I think that I saw a blueprint that night where I thought people will look at Kilmarnock, they'll see that result and they'll look at it and they'll watch the game back because you can get the video, the whole game, and watch it back and say, right, what did Killy do? Teams in the bottom half, for example, Livingston, Dundee, anyone around that, you could say St Mirren, but I think they'll get better. But teams will look at that and think, right, what can we do to stay in the game against Hearts when they're not quite on it? And I think that it just depends on what you've got at your disposal. David Gray has got better players at his disposal so they can be a bit braver. But when Derek spoke about not doing the basics, he's talking about, and he doesn't want to dig out individuals because these guys have done fantastically well for him. But what he's talking about is Steinwender doesn't deal with the one-on-one against Cadden, and the two midfielders, Devlin and Magnuson would be the ones that I would point the finger at, have allowed a midfielder to drift out, and neither of them were marking anyone. So it's take your pick. It's one or the other, has to be right up against McGrath so that he doesn't get the volley. So that's goal number one. The second goal, and this is where I thought it was really poor. I don't know whether you remember, just before, 5 minutes before, if that, the ball got played out to McGrath. He shaped to cross a ball in with his right foot. He dragged it. He sent McEntee for a hot dog. He jumped to block it. Thanks very much. See you later. I don't think he hit the cross particularly well, if I remember correctly, and it got cleared. But it was a little signal of intent. 2-3 minutes later, the ball comes out to him again. He does the same trick again, a little step over, shimmies round him, And, again, McGrath, no change. We're not talking about a tricky winger, just drifts past him. And then that time he whipped in a fantastic ball. And to be honest, I mean, that finish from Campbell, that's not even a half chance. To score from there is it's a 1 in 10 at best. I mean, it's an unbelievable header from there, from a great cross. But this is what happens in professional football because it's a job. You actually dig people out when they haven't done their job, and you know people will say, oh, you can't just blame it on one guy, but McIntosh has done really poorly in that situation, particularly for a guy that had been playing right back. He got shimmied too quick, too easily, allowed the cross in, and then at that point, if you see, is the movement. Campbell goes across the near post, gets across the near post, and the finish is incredible. And I think that at that point, 2-0, you're kind of thinking, right, well, Hearts are going to have to do something different. And I think, Derek obviously had to ring the changes at half time. But if you go 2-0 down away from home, that's a hell of a task. That is a hell of a task. That is a hell of a mountain to climb when you've got a raucous Hibs crowd, are going to get behind their team and shout them on. And suddenly your game plan of maybe being conservative and hitting on the counter, which I thought would suit Hearts perfectly today, suddenly you've actually got to start playing risk and reward. And then what you've got to do is you've got to start leaving your two centre-backs, who incidentally, I thought they got run ragged today. Those two centre-backs for Hearts got run ragged today because they got exposed, which they haven't had. They've always had cover. They've had Kingsley or Milne, and they've had Steinwender or McIntosh close with them. Once they had to defend 2v2 because they were pushing men forward as they had to do, they didn't look too comfy. And that's the thing for me is that the message to learn for Hearts, the obvious message, don't go 2-0 down and force your manager to have to push the fullbacks on to give you something attacking wise, because then you're going to be exposed by the likes of Bowie, who likes the physicality and he's no slouch, and Boyle, who likes to run down the sides.
At that stage, when you go 3-0 down just after half time, you have to take risks, and Hearts eventually got themselves back into the game. But before that, at half time, the manager has changed shapes, Scott, and he's brought on Harry Milne. He's played him on the right hand side, and it's interesting that Stuart was talking earlier about, look, you're 2-0 down. It's got to be Kerjota that comes on. He was asked about that afterwards and said he didn't feel at that stage it was a game that needed chasing. It's something that might done later on, but within 3 minutes we're 3-0 down, and that changes shape, which does take a little bit of time to get used to. Everything just seems to be up in the air. What did you make of the halftime switch with the changes and then the concession of the third goal, Scott?
I think the rationale for McInnes would have probably been two things. I think firstly, getting Milne onto that right side of the park, I think was probably to try and give a bit more cover to Steinwender, considering how we'd lost those initial two goals. And in that respect, it makes sense, but I think as Stuart's already touched upon a couple of times, I think that experiment in itself with Harry Milne had been well past its due-by date, a couple of months ago at least. So it wasn't going to offer us much going forward. I think bringing Beningame on into the centre of the park was just a no-brainer. I think what McInnes was probably hoping was, we've still got 45 minutes in front of us. Hibs have had a couple of occasions earlier this season against the likes of Falkirk and Kilmarnock, where there've been a couple of goals up and then, been pulled back to 1 point. So he's probably maybe thought that there was an opportunity for us there not to throw the kitchen sink at the scenario in the first 15, 20 minutes, but almost ease ourselves back into the game. Now, this is where fans will look at this two ways. The change of shape at half time, I think it does spook the players. And I think Finlay, especially at the goal, is just in an area of the park where he just doesn't want to be in. Now, it's still poor from him in terms of playing that ball in off the Hibs player, and then it sort of falls into Kieran Bowie, who still has a lot of work to do and takes his goal really well. But that change probably does have a direct impact on the lead up to the third goal, because the players, for a good 15 minutes, I would say, looked very uncomfortable within that shape. How we get back into it, again, I think as Hearts fans, you probably just want to view it from a positive standpoint and say it was all down to our making. But I think Josh Mulligan coming off at the 62nd minute mark has a huge bearing on it as well, which we might touch upon. But yeah, in terms of the changes, they both make sense to me. But again, I think if you look at the body language of the players for that 10, 15 minute spell, very similar to Rangers at Tynecastle last week in the second half, where in that transition on the break, we looked like we could have scored another couple of goals, and Hibs were in a similar position for the opening 15 minutes today. So it certainly had an impact on the goal. It might have brought us back into the game eventually, but then we're giving ourselves such a huge sort of task in front of us by being 3 goals down at that stage.
Stuart, we saw the Jekyll and Hyde of Hearts today. First 60, 65 minutes or so, not good enough, as Derek McInnes was talking about not doing the basics right. Then the last half hour was like freestyle. It was like there were no real instructions. Just get it forward quickly, get it wide, get it in, cause chaos, see what you can do. I think we 68 minutes for the first shot on target, and then I think we had 7 in total between the 68th minute and the end of the game. From an outsider's perspective, looking in, how good are Hearts, and where does what they've done so far put them as far as this title race is concerned?
It's funny. I had a text from a friend of mine who's a Hearts fan, and he texted me yesterday and said, "Looking forward to seeing the champions elect tomorrow." This is what he said before the game, and and I laughed and I said to him, I said, "Do you think this team, what we're seeing, is good enough to win a league?" And he was like, "Well, they have been so far." I was like, "No one gets trophies handed out in December." I said, "They're in the race." It's interesting that someone said, I think it was Boyd, was very quick to dismiss Rangers after they got beat at Tynecastle last weekend. If Rangers sign well in January, and I know that's a big if, do you know, it's really interesting. I actually think where we are now, I think this league title is going to be won or lost on who has the best transfer window in January. And I would argue that Hearts have the least amount of business to do. He's got a lot of players who've played to a really good level in the first half of the season. What does he need? What does he need? If you're looking, you want to have cover in an ideal world. Brendan always wanted 2 players in every position. Now I'm not sure whether the likes of Hearts, I know they've got a budget. I don't know whether they've got enough money for that. But I think that if you look at, they have cover at centre back. They've got 2, in my view, 2 very capable left backs. I'm not sure they have a good right back. I haven't seen enough of Borchgrevink. I haven't seen enough of him. So I'm not saying he's not the answer, but if he was the answer, surely he would have been playing in all of the big games, and generally he hasn't. I don't think Steinwinder is. I definitely don't think McAtee is the answer. So they need to look at that position. I'm a big fan of Beningame, and I suppose sometimes you forget. Scott mentioned it. We don't know how fit he was, and that's a very fair point, because if I had Beningame at my disposal, I'd play him every week, because he's the best midfielder they have, bar none, and no one will convince me otherwise, because I've never seen him have a day where he's leggy. I've never seen him have a day where you're looking like, the game bypasses him. He's always in the game in some way, shape or form, whether it's holding his position and keeping the shape, or whether it's pressing, or whether it's when he wins the ball back. That's the bit that I look at and think, he gives, he was the guy that was the general that was kind of, speeding the game up. That's the thing, I like about Beningame, and there's an element of Hibs were kind of trying to withdraw into a shape. But if you look at it and you think about that front 3, I mean, Derek's obviously got options to tweak it. I always say that, good teams have got to be able to adapt to play a back 4 if the manager wants it, or 3 centre backs. Normally, people play 3 centre backs because they don't think they've got 2 good ones. I don't think that's the problem for Derek. I think he really likes Halkett and Findlay when they're fit, and they'll be his go-to guys. But I think that teams are going to look at Hearts, and they're going to look at these games. They're going to look at when they played against St Mirren. They're going to look about when they got passed off the park by Motherwell. They're going to look at Hibs today. They're going to look at Kilmarnock grinding out a point at Tynecastle. They're going to watch these videos back and they're going to pick out little tidbits of how do we make it difficult for Hearts to have an impact. And I think that's the question where, Derek, along with the board, they've got to identify where they think they're short. I don't think they've got enough in terms of what you've got right now. I don't think what they have is enough to win the league. I don't believe that. But if Derek McInnes doesn't get help from the board now, my God, there's something wrong with Hearts. I think the support will be there if he wants it.
I think there's going to be support. There's going to be financial support. There's going to be a new right back. There's probably going to be a new winger. There might be a new forward as well. Where it leaves us, and this is something I want to talk about after the break, is it's a difficult one just now because we're talking the same day off. It's only a few hours since the game ended. I'm pissed off. I hate losing in Edinburgh. I hate losing any games. This season, I hate dropping points. But I just wonder, Scott, if this result might show Derek, right, okay, that's told me more about that player or that setup than I would have done if we just meandered along and continued to pick up draws on your travels and wins at home or whatever. What's the chances of ultimately, long term, this result being an opportunity to just not so much reset, but was something that was maybe happening at the right time, even although we didn't want it to be, if we can learn from what happened today?
Yeah, so I think firstly, Derek McInnes has been well aware of our sort of our weakness down that right hand side since the start of the season. Chesnikov was somebody that we wanted to bring in during August, but unfortunately his team were fighting for a league challenge in their own country, so we had to wait for that pre-contract to sort of kick in on the 1st of January. We've obviously had the Dutch right back in for a medical over in London last week, so that one looks like that one's just about over the line as well. And then most of the rumours seem to be circulating around us, maybe looking at another strike option, maybe something a little bit different to what we already have currently in the ranks of the squad. So I think there's an acknowledgement that we still have a lot to improve upon. And I think, look, I can't talk for any other Hearts fan. I can only talk for myself. When I look at this Hearts team just now, and this is where I think a lot of people get the argument wrong. When we beat Celtic and Rangers, the argument starts being about individual against individual. So pundits will come out and talk about Cammy Devlin against Callum McGregor, or they'll talk about Nico Raskin against Thomas Magnuson. It's like, well, on paper as an individual, these players are streets ahead of the guys in our team. The thing that's carried Hearts up to this point is having a manager who knows the league. So he's first of all been able to get underperforming players, because this team has still got the core nucleus of underperforming Hearts teams. It's still Benny, it's still Cammy, it's still Craig Halkett, it's still Lauren Shankland, Stephen Kingsley's still involved. So we still have the nucleus there of a legacy Hearts team. This isn't what you would call a Jamestown Tony Bloom Hearts team. Yeah, as I've said for weeks and months now, it's still very much in its infancy in terms of that journey. So I think what the fans need to acknowledge is that Derek McInnes has done a really good job up to this point to get this team playing well as a collective. That's where our main strength is. We're a very well-balanced group of individuals. On an individual-to-individual basis, this current Hearts team doesn't touch the 98 or the 2006 Cup winning sides for me, just in terms of individual quality. That shows you how good a job Derek McInnes has done up to this point. But the other good thing is that I think he and the board have acknowledged that there is still a lot of room for improvement, predominantly down that right-hand side, and we know that will get fixed over the next week or so. So we're still very much in that league title conversation. How it'll look at the end of January, I think will be quite interesting, as Stuart's touched upon. Celtic, reading between the lines, I don't think he's going to get the backing that I think Celtic fans would be looking for. Rangers board has talked a lot about sustainability over the last couple of months, so I think that kind of answers itself. So I do think we're still, out of the three teams, we are still the team that are coming into this transfer window from a position of strength, even although Celtic and Rangers could point to individuals in their two teams being of a higher calibre than Hearts have. I still think we've got the better balance to the team, but as today has proven, there's situations for different midfield setups. And I think when you're up against teams like Falkirk, Celtic and Rangers who are happy having the bulk of the ball, having those ball winners, having those disruptors, having those guys that want to win second balls is key. But then when we're playing a game against Hibs, and I think Hibs are like St Mirren and Aberdeen and us to an extent. They're at their best in that transition and winning the ball back and then hitting on the break. They don't really actually want to have 60-70% of the ball because they don't really have all that much creativity within the ranks. So I think when Hearts are in that position, that's where we need to get a Jew back from injury and get him involved. And we need to obviously fix that issue down the right hand side. Because Stuart's right about Kizzaridis, he has been getting doubled up on. But part of that problem isn't just that in isolation, it's the fact that then we don't have an alternative option down the right to hit. So teams know that they can double up on Kizzaridis, knowing that we don't have much coming down the right-hand side. So that should be a problem that fixes itself, providing the players we bring in are of the required standard.
You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. Did it cross your mind, Stuart Lovell, that if Salinger had not saved Lawrence Shankland's effort and it had gone 3-3, that might be up there as one of the biggest Hibs moments?
Yeah, it was funny actually because I didn't get the chance to talk about what I view as being a clear error for the second goal. I thought I was talking in the satellite truck after the game. One of the guys was trying to say, "Oh, I don't think he had a clear view of it." And just as he said that, they showed the high behind camera view, and he saw it all the way. There was a degree of whip on it and a good bit of pace, but I mean, listen, he saved it. That's all you could say. But he effectively spilled it right down into the middle for a tap in if everyone was following up, which of course Cammy Devlin was. That ball has to be pushed away, caught, tipped over the bar, something or other. And I think Devlin scored late 89 minutes. I think it was late, wasn't it? And my point is, he should save that. That shouldn't be a goal. And then there's a degree of calmness that you're 3-1 up going into injury time and it's not the same game. He brought that pressure on Hibs because as soon as it went 3-2, you're like, well, there's going to be plenty of time added on. I knew Hearts would get a chance to equalise. I just knew it was obvious at that stage they were going to. And I actually thought that, again, Cadden's, there was a really poor piece of defending. For me, as bad as the defending was for Hibs' first two goals, I thought that was a glaring error by Cadden. Kizzaridis delivery into the box was great. The strike was great. I thought Shankland did everything right. I just thought it was an incredible save that you get from goalkeepers with big levers. He's a big unit, Salinger. He made a great save. He actually made a very good save, I think, from Kabangu as well. So he made the difficult saves look easy. And you mentioned the one in the first half where it was a cushioned header from Magnuson.
Yeah.
And it was like a hot potato. And I understand where you're coming from. There are times where you look at Salinger and think, God, is he the answer? But, I think he's the best keeper that Hibs have, and he did make a couple of phenomenal saves when it came to the crunch. But yeah, my goodness, if Shankland had scored, I mean, Neil said to me, and I wouldn't disagree, if that goes in, there's enough time for Hearts to get a winner.
Yeah, there was still 6 minutes of added time.
Now, I have to be honest, I thought that would have been daylight robbery over the course of the game because we have to remember that at 3-0, there was a breakaway for Hibs. I think it was Mulligan dispossesses someone on the right hand side.
Boyle. I think it's Boyle anyway.
Boyle's fast stick for tapping.
Yeah.
And Mulligan took a touch and he had decided, you could tell, you can just see it when you watch it back. Guys like, I'm shooting. You could see he would decide, I'm shooting. I'm not squaring this. All he has to do is feed it into the far post. It's an easy pass, big area to Boyle tap in 4-0. And by the way, at 4-0, I actually think Derek is like, they're not getting any more. You can't come back from 4-0. I know Hearts fans might say it's Hibs, you've always got a chance. But I honestly think Derek would have said, enough. I think he would have just said, sod this. We're just going to take our medicine and take our 4-0 beating and get up the road. There was another chance. I can't remember what the score was. I don't know. I think it was 3-1. Klidja went through and he was 1-on-1 and the goalie actually goes down early and he should dink him. And he just tries to beat him with power. It's a really poor finish because the goalie Schwaller's he's a big unit, but he goes down, he should dink him. And I thought that was a great chance. It's funny, you were quite, I was surprised how heavy you were on Shankland when you said when you said in the first half his header was a sitter. I mean, I didn't think it was a sitter.
No, for
I
him,
know
you
he's
would
a great
expect to hit the
finisher, but
target.
you're right. He should hit the target, and no one will know that better than Shankland. But he's still got a lot to do. I mean, the pace on the cross was great. He's guiding it. By the way, he's missed it by inches.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not he didn't miss. He's just tried to feed it back where it came from, and actually, it's almost like bend it in with the head. That's what you do. It just kind of curls. I actually thought it was an incredibly, not unlucky because he missed target, but it was a difficult effort. I think that.
But it was a compare and contrast. The comparison is with the Hibs chances is a half chance that's finished. The Hearts chance is a big chance that's not.
I think the difference is that he's outside of the posts. I think he is. That's my recollection. He's got a defender who can still impact it, and really when McGrath scores, he's not worried about blocking. He think I could get a deflection. All you're thinking is target, good contact target, and he beats him at his near post. But I think that that game could have got away from Hearts, and this is why there'll be Hearts fans saying we could have, would have, should have. It's like, hold on a minute, 75 minutes, you barely kicked your ass. Would I say it 3-2 flattered Hearts? Yeah, I think it flatters Hearts. But if the goalie doesn't make the save, I'm just like any other Hibs fan in there. I'm nervous, thinking, "Oh my God, you know what's going to happen here." And I think that that's credit goes to the fact that they didn't down tools, they didn't chuck the towel in. I think what they started to play with clarity. This is where I think Beningame comes into his own. In games, big games, he has a level of composure and no little skill, by the way, where he takes little touches and he's like, can I drive through there? Yeah, I will. Just kicks the turbo and gets through people. And then he picks the right pass. And if he can't get between people, he passes it between people. And I've said this to you before, Mark, and I will say this is an alternative view of Cammy Devlin, who he showed me some things today that I hadn't seen. There was a time where I'm sure that a lot of Hearts fans will say, I think it was Mulligan, or Bowie flattened him, and it could have maybe been booked. But I think it was McGrath went into to go and take it off him, and Devlin actually turned and went towards Hibs' goal. And I remember even I was like, no wonder you went to go and try and splat him, because you thought he's just going to take a touch back towards his own goal and play sideways and backwards, as he does 90% of the time. Now, I think this is where, when I hear Hearts fans waxing lyrical about Devlin, I'm like, steady. This guy has got great energy, gets around the pitch, presses very well, all this type of stuff. But he's not your game changer. You've got Kizaridis, you've got Shankland, you've got Braga, and then you've got great delivery from set pieces and great movement. And that's how Hearts win games. Right there. You want to know how Hearts win games? That's how they do it. Front three and set pieces. Look at what you've got from midfield. No goals, no assists. I mean, people will laugh, say, oh, well, Devlin scored today. I'm in a state of shock that he was up there. But credit where it's due. He was up there. Because he was like, I've got to play on the front foot. I've got to play 20 yards further up the pitch because we've got to get back in the game. And he was there to stick it in the net, fair play. And he did show a couple of things today. And I'm like, maybe this guy is evolving. But he needs to. Because I think playing next to Beningame, if you're not going to be able to learn next to him, then you're not going to learn at all. And I would say that I feel like coaches, you've got to change the mindset of a player. Because I still feel when I watch him, he plays very safe. And I would say there's a time when you play safe when you're getting pressed and you're about to get splatted. But your first thought when you play in that position, and I played it when I was at Livingston, your first thought should always be play forward. Always play forward. And I think for me, too often, he takes the easy option when there are other options. But I do think he's getting better. But he needs to get better, because that's the one thing. If you want to talk about teams who are going to win the title, you're going to need to have more than your front three winning you games and set pieces winning you games. You've mentioned to me about Azure and saying, oh, he can bring us something. And I think he's injured more often than he's ready to play. But Derek's got to kind of put some focus on the midfield to say, we can't just rely solely on the front three all the time. And I think that's maybe a good thing that came out of it for Devlin today, is that, actually I can score. I can offer something in the final third.
Yeah. Oh,
You could argue though, Stuart, that having a front three would be a start though, because I think if you compare us to Celtic and Rangers, we at least have the building blocks for the first three. Whereas I think you'd say, especially with Rangers just now, they don't have that. Celtic
I,
don't have a recognised striker, and Rangers, I would
yeah,
say, have a
yeah.
recognised front three at this stage.
Scott, you've got the best front three in the league, right? There's no question about that. What we're talking about here, though, let's be honest, you're talking about winning the league,
it's
right?
getting the ball to them.
You're talking about winning the league. You're not talking about finishing second or third. You're talking about winning the league. And the question is, when push comes to shove, and let's be honest, once we get into not so much January, but February, and certainly March, April, May, every single game counts. The question I want to say, and none of us know the answer, is, you know, what does Celtic have over Hearts? Experience, experience of what it means to go into games where it's like must win. I mean, actually, a lot of the time they've been that far clear that there probably hasn't been that much pressure on. They're feeling a pressure that they haven't known since they were trying to go for 10 in a row, and that didn't go down too well for them. So I give Hearts a very realistic shout, a very realistic shout. But we're trying to, you're asking me what I see from the outside looking in. You know, everyone who works in professional football, your job is to analyse the opposition and try and find cracks. And I don't think any of us would be naive enough to say Hearts are perfect because today showed they definitely aren't. What they need to try and do is eliminate the cracks. And I believe that they do need to support the front three. I mean, to be fair, Liverpool were a phenomenal team who did pretty much win Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues with a front three of Mane, Firmino, and Salah. They pretty much said you as winners the game, and those three were that good that they did. But I think that's you want to have a little bit of backup because your centre backs have done phenomenally well for you in Halkett and Finlay. My goodness, the goals that the amount of points those two have got you from scoring important goals from set pieces. Again, can you expect that to continue? Because when I'm doing defensive set pieces when I'm about to play Hearts, I'm going to say to him, "You better get damn tight to these two, or we're going to need to go zonal, or we're gonna take away Halkett and Finlay and take away that strength." Because if we leave them 1v1, their movement is great. Hearts deliver into good areas. These are the things that you've got to think about. No one's going to roll out the red carpet for Hearts and say, "On you go. Go and take your first league title in 50, 60 years, whatever it is." They're gonna make it tough.
Scott, what's the biggest lesson, either positive or negative, that Derek McInnes can take from what happened today?
He's probably learned something about the midfield three, and in terms of when that's going to be at its most effective, or at least that's just as a fan, that's what I had feared in the lead up to these games, and more importantly, the next three games. But I think today just validated that concern for me that bringing those midfield three in for Parkhead and at home to Rangers, I think it had its place. A little bit like the Harry Milne thing, where we'd done it for a couple of games and it had its place at Ibrox, but then we decided to just push that experiment too far. I think we're at that stage with the midfield, so I think you've either got to make the decision of saying we're at home to Livingston next week. Do we need three disruptors in our team? I don't think we do. All due respect to Livingston, we will have the bulk of the game. I think you've got to find a way of either getting Kurjota into a front four and just going 4-2-4, or you go 4-2-3-1. You try and get even somebody like a Blair Spittle into the team. You try and find a way of just bringing in a little bit more guile and goal threat for the centre of the park. Because I think Stuart's right about that. I think that is something that you do need in particular fixtures. And I think home to Livingston, away to Dundee, home to St Mirren, those are the ideal fixtures for that. I think if I saw that midfield three lining up next week, I'd be slightly concerned that we haven't quite learned that lesson yet.
Stuart, I want to take you back to 1994-95, and there's a point to this. Reading had come up as champions of the third tier, which was known as the second division back then, because the Premier League was now in operation. And in season 1994-95, no one really gave Reading much of a chance to do something. And ultimately, with you scoring goals from kind of a forward area and reaching the playoff final, you got to, or so close to the promised land, and back then you were unlucky. It was only one team that went up automatically, and you were denied by Bolton in the playoff final to get to the Premier League. The reason I bring this up is because as a team that were kind of unfancied before the start of the season, didn't get off to a good start losing at Wolves, but then you went on a run. Then you had a blip around about kind of October, November time, but then you kicked on again. What is it like as a player when expectation is not there to begin the season, but then the pressure intensifies and you go on this run like you did in the December period and towards the end of the season? How much of the outside noise do players hear? And I ask that purely based on Hearts challenging for a title when before the season no one even spoke about that being a possibility.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, you're going back to the mid 90s, so 30 odd years ago, no social media, and Reading were not a big noise in the championship. So it was easier for us to remain under the radar. The one thing I remember from within the confines of the dressing room, Mark McGee was our manager then, who incidentally his reputation has probably taken a bit of a dunt up here because of what happened with him at Aberdeen and Dundee. But let me tell you, this guy was one of the best, if not the best manager I ever played under, and was a phenomenal guy to work with. I was speaking to a Motherwell fan the other day who said, "Oh, this football we're playing under Askew reminds me of when McGee came here." And I was like, "Yeah, you remember they were nearly favourites to get relegated, in the following season they finished third, playing unbelievable football." And I think that there is a lot of noise around Hearts. I think that Derek is very experienced. This is the thing. This is where I think Hearts they've got the real deal. They've got a brilliant manager with really good wisdom. He'll have kicked some asses in the dressing room after today. Of course he will, and they deserved it. But they've also got to get back on the horse very quickly. I looked at their fixtures for January, and they look pretty
Yeah,
kind.
they're okay. Yeah, they're
Pretty
okay.
kind, yeah. But I think that what Mark McGee did, which I never experienced, didn't even know it was the thing, he boxed games off. And he literally, you didn't know whether it was 3 or 4 or 5. It would be a month at the most. And he would literally say, right, don't worry about anything else. This is it. And he actually used to set us targets. It was really interesting. He used to say, right, we've got these 5 games coming up. I'm looking for 11 points, right? I want 11 points. And you're like, why do you get 12 or 13 or 15? He's like, well, we're ahead of the curve then. But I want 11. That's what I'm looking for. And he said, don't worry about anything else. This is what I want. These 5 games, this is what we're going to focus on. So you would literally, when managers talk about taking it one game at a time, and I think this wouldn't surprise me if Derek does this, where he boxes it off and just kind of says, because Hearts are going to be top of the league at the end of the year, right? We know that is a racing, unless Celtic spank Motherwell at Fir Park, which I don't think anyone believes is going to happen. So Hearts are going to be top going into 2026. So I would imagine Derek will be saying, right, okay, so January, that's us. Just look at January. This is us. Okay, we're going to work on these games, focus on these games, and say, right, this is what we're looking for. And then once you get to that, then you reassess and say, right, where are we? And then, of course, you look into, and that to me would be a really good way of being able to do it. You can't stop players from going on social media. You can't control people 24/7. I would strongly persuade players to ditch social media, particularly now, because to be honest, any good player who's worth his salt will know how they've played. I would imagine that every single player in Hearts dressing room will know how they played today. They will know if they were below. I actually saw Craig Halkett when I was walking out the stadium, and he just had this look of deflation. And I think he's a really good pro. Brilliant to see him back. I mean, I don't know Craig that well, but I know him to say hello to, and he's always been a lovely guy to chat to. And it's great to see him back with his new contract and stuff like that. But guys like that, the manager wouldn't have needed to say to him how he played. I promise you, they'd have been like, I know how I played. I can assess my own performance. And good players want to be able to kind of bounce back. So they'll be hurting after the result today, but you get back on the horse and you look about what's coming down the track. And there's a great opportunity, because I wouldn't say Rangers are out of it, but unless Rangers have a phenomenal window, and again, Scott's raised the doubts about how much money they've got to play with, and their recruitment, let's be honest, has not been great. So it probably looks like a 2-horse race. and they've just got to focus on what they can do and understand what got us to where we got to. That's a really good way of looking at it. Remind people. I would say instead of doing the video analysis to show what you did wrong against Hibs, I'd be inclined to start cutting some videos about showing Kizaridis cutting inside and bending it in the top bin from 25 yards against Dundee United. Remind him what he did, to kind of get Hearts to the top of the table, for starters. Some positive affirmation about, you are good players and you're not, no one's top of the league at halfway point by fluke. The Hearts are where they are because they deserve to be. No one can argue with that. I would love to be able to cheer Hearts on for the rest of the season, but having played with Hibs, I mean, I acknowledge that it's massively important, to be honest, to see someone else other than Celtic or Rangers win the league. It really is. I just wish it was someone else. But realistically, and we all know this, it's going to be Hearts or Aberdeen or Hibs. And this season, it ain't going to be Aberdeen or Hibs. So it's Hearts or no one. So it's part of me is like, oh, it'd be amazing, but it's, not them. What I will say is I respect what the players have done, and I really respect what Derek McInnes has done. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And this has got the feel of a Leicester City. And I wish I could say Reading, but it didn't end well for us. But it does have a feel, because I'll be honest, I didn't believe Leicester City were going to win the league until like end of April. And I was like, shit, they're actually going to do it. I didn't believe until then. I was still convinced it's going to collapse. It's going to go wrong. It's going to go wrong. And I think this is the point about, I haven't met a single Hearts fan who said to me, we will win the league. Not one. You're all hoping. You're all praying that it's going to go that way. But you know what? You're in it. I mean, that's one thing no one can argue with. If you're top of the table at halfway point, you are a serious, I mean, you're in the mix, and it'll be fascinating to see what happens. But I think that will be the thing that instead of looking too far in the distance, just keep it focused short and get back on the winning trail as quickly as possible.
One final question, and I want to ask the same question to both of you, but you'll obviously come at this from a different angle. One from a Hearts supporter, one not from a Hearts supporter. I'm going to start with you, Scott. The question is simple. Given where Hearts fans hoped they would be at the start of the season, challenging, maybe trying to split the old firm or whatever, to where they are now, what is the most important thing for Hearts fans to do from now on, starting 2026, that would give us as supporters the best opportunity to support a winning team in 2026? Where should our mindset be right now as a Hearts supporter?
I think it's trying to develop that understanding of the long-term picture. I think when you're in a title race, you can't just it. The players naturally need to be put into that place of focus on it one game at a time. But I think when you're a supporter, I think you do have to try and remind yourself about upcoming fixtures, not just for you, but for your closest rivals as well. I think today is a good opportunity for some of that sort of hopeful foresight from Hearts fans. They can look at today, they can look at the disappointment of today, and it's not that you can just brush that off, but you look at the next three fixtures being very winnable fixtures, albeit with their own individual challenges. You then look at Celtic having to make trips to Motherwell, to Ibrox, playing Rangers at home, and then having to play Dundee United at home. Again, they will all have their challenges as well, and Celtic are still in a state of trying to adapt to what a new manager wants. He's still in a situation where he'll still be running a close eye on players to try and figure out who he wants to keep and who he potentially wants to move on, if not this transfer window, but at the end of the season. So I think we've got to try and this is a learning curve for fans as much as it is for the club, because it's not a situation that we've found ourselves in too often over the last sort of few decades. So I think it is a bit of a case of take it on the chin, you take your medicine. Could have been a lot worse today. I think if Hibs had got that fourth goal and then potentially that fifth goal, there would have been a serious conversation and concern about how that would have impacted on us going into the Livingston game. I think cutting the deficit and having a late surge means that that shouldn't happen now. It should be a bit easier for the players to get today out of their system and start to focus on the next upcoming games. And the fans just need to keep backing them. Again, these players, it is very much a team effort. It's been a collective effort up to this point, and I think what we've not got to do is go into that situation of starting to find boo boys because you maybe lose one or two games, because I think it has been built on the collective energy of the whole team just now, albeit with a bit of magic dust up in the final third. Everyone's contributed up to this point, so I think it's a case of staying supportive of the players. Derek McInnes is a well-seasoned operator in this league, which is again something that we can take in as a positive over our rivals in Celtic and Rangers just now, and keep building on that. We know that the transfer activity is there. That's going to happen over the next week or so. So that's not something where we're going to be sitting on the 29th and 30th of January and worrying about what the club are going to do to try and fix a couple of situations. That's already pretty much being done at this moment, and hopefully there's maybe one or two more to follow.
Stuart, same question to you. How should Hearts fans be feeling and what should they be thinking going into this new year?
I suppose the best comparison, Mark, that I can make, you and I are both big golf fans, and the highlight of the sporting year for me in 2025 was Rory McIlroy winning at
Mm.
Augusta to secure the career Grand Slam. And I loved what his caddy said to him. He had his chance. He had a relatively short putt on the 18th green to win the tournament in the Grand Slam, and he missed it. And it had been a real roller coaster on the back nine at Augusta. And they walked down to the 18th tee for the first hole of the playoff. And his caddy said to him, "Well, boss, we'd have taken this at the start of the week." And it was funny because Rory McIlroy was like, he said, "I was totally on a high again." I was thinking, no, he's right. So if I said to any Hearts fan at the start of the season, "Do you remember you and I swapped messages?" And I was like, "Has someone banged the head? Hearts are 25 to 1 to win the league." And I think I said to you, I wouldn't back them with another naught on. Now, I know I like to poke fun at Hearts, but I wouldn't have backed Hearts at 250 to 1, right? And listen, there'll be loads of Hearts fans who have put money on all that type of 25 to 1. And I was like, behave yourself. Well, they're now 3 to 1. Okay, 3 to 1 after today's game, and they're in a two-horse race realistically. And I think that there's some fans who are glass half empty who will be like, "This will be our only chance." No, it won't. It won't be Hearts' only chance. I think the thing that fans are concerned about, and this might be valid, is are Celtic and Rangers going to be at this level again? You know, we've seen Celtic be rubbish in the last 25 years and Rangers be rubbish in the last 25 years, but very rarely together. And maybe that's the thing that's kind of giving Hearts fans the heebie-jeebies. Oh, they're never going to be this rubbish again. It's like you can't control that. But Hearts, I think, because of where they are and the backing of Tony Bloom, etc., I think Hearts are going to be a force to be reckoned with. So I don't think this is going to be their only shot. But you've got to remind yourselves at the start of the season, if someone said to you you're going to be top at the start of 2026, there's not a single Hearts fan who wouldn't snatch your hand off. They'd have been like, "You're kidding. You're winding me up. We're going to be top. You know, what's the catch?" No, there's no catch. You've had a phenomenal first half of the season. You're going to be top. So Scott's point is back the team, and you know, and make sure there are no boo boys. If ever there's a time when fans have got to get behind the team and don't dig people out, this is it. Because I think the squad has got an honesty about it, which I respect. You know, I played for some teams that did well, and all of the successful teams that I played as part of, they had this kind of togetherness, which I see. I see in Hearts didn't nail it today by any means, but they finished the game strongly. And I have to be honest, I wouldn't worry about them recovering from today. I actually think Scott touched on it. The way they finished the game, I think will make it a lot easier for them to put that in a box and put it to the side and move on. But I think the fans have got to remind themselves, you know, you were a long shot at the start of the season. Now you're top of the table in a two-horse race. That's a great position to be in.
When Stuart Lovell is saying positive things about Hearts, then you know something special might be on the verge of happening. 2025 was a year of two halves. May 2026 continue the way 2025 has ended, with Heart of Midlothian top of the table. Thank you to everybody for listening during this calendar year. Thank you to our sponsors, Forrest Hepburn and McDonald, and to all of our guests who've given up their time this year to talk Hearts. Mr. Lovell, Mr. McIntosh, thank you. And to all of you listening, Happy New Year, everyone. Bye for now.